Okay, as was mentioned, my name's Julie Buck. I'm the Bannock County FCS educator here in Bannock County. Thanks for making our home base here be such a great hit tonight. I'm going to be discussing savory stews tonight, and I am the yellow handout. If you want to get that ready, that would be great. I'd like you to think about your favorite soup or stew. I'd like you to think about that flavor that comes to your mind. Okay, have you got it? I can see some heads going like that. Think about the taste and the texture qualities in that favorite soup or stew. We're going to talk about each of those, and I am actually going to take you through the recipe tonight. And I've actually made some modifications to it, even though it's a great recipe to start with. So when we think of savory, we think of a broth or something that has a seasoning in it that enhances the flavor of everything else in it, but doesn't mask that flavor. So if you'll notice on the recipe, there's no pepper and there's no salt. Okay, and you'll notice when you taste it tonight that it has great flavor. So you're able to do that with some skill and some technique. Vegetables. This is a very basic stew. Can't go wrong with the basics like carrots, potatoes, onions, a little bit of garlic. And this stew called for pepper, green pepper, so that's in there. But I kept it very basic. What would be some other vegetables you would add to your stew?
Celery.
Celery, yes. I was kind of surprised celery wasn't there, but yes. Cabbage is really good in stew. So it just depends. You know, those are all good choices. All right, so those are great ideas of making some changes. Then stews are thick. And that's what we like about stews, is that it has that mouthfeel where it kind of sticks around a little bit. It's kind of nice. And then there's typically a source of protein in a stew or a soup. There's sometimes an entree dish. And so this is beef stew. So I'd like you and I to consider some ways, even though this is a great recipe, to even modify it a little bit tighter to make it even more healthful of a choice. So let's take a look at the protein option there. What kind of cut is that listed there? Round, right. And the leaner cuts of beef have loin or round in the name, and I can see from the pre-quiz that most of you knew that correct answer, so that's great. So when you're choosing a lean cut, loin or round, like tenderloin, sirloin, this happens to be a round steak that I used in the stew tonight. So these don't have as much of the marbling throughout the muscle fibers, and there wasn't any meat fat to cut off. It was very, very lean. The vegetables, of course, we want to choose those that are in good quality. I bought them, fresh on the day I made the stew, and you'll want to include those that your family will enjoy. So you can definitely make it personalized, and those are the recipes that seem to be asked for again and again. All right, let's talk about fat. This recipe asks us just to spray the skillet with a non-stick cooking spray. No oil, no butter, in with those onions and peppers and garlic, sweating in the pan, just a nice hot, medium high skillet with a spray, and nothing stuck. It was very nice. And then you can retrain your taste buds to really notice the flavors of the vegetables in that stew and the broth that's there. All right, stew, this calls for low-fat evaporated milk. Well, I wanted to make it dairy-free. So I made it dairy-free tonight. I used soy milk. All right, and you could use almond milk if you wanted to. So this is actually gluten-free and dairy-free tonight. It's not a vegan dish, but at least I've got two of the big ones out there for taking care of for you. So think about that. Think about a low-fat cream option, and certainly that would work. A low-fat evaporated milk, skim milk, soy milk. Those are all great options. Now, a thickener. We needed to have a thickener. That's the one thing we like about stew, is it's nice and thick, and this one is pretty thick. It's sticking to my spoon, so it's a nice thick stew. In order to keep it gluten-free, then this recipe called for cornstarch. This is really easy Easy to do. You just take your cornstarch and you mix it. The recipe asked for you to mix it with wine. And wine gives a little bit of a pop, a little bit of a tart. But because this was the family edition tonight, I thought, well, what are some options to wine in case you don't want to use wine? Wine or other alcohol in cooking, even after 2.5 hours, there's still about 5% of the alcohol left in a dish that calls for an alcohol, even if you flame it off of the dish. So I just thought, family friendly, how about apple cider vinegar? So I substituted for wine apple cider vinegar. Would there be any other things that you could substitute for alcohol? Yes?
What about the red wine vinegar?
Still has red wine.
Still has it in. I use balsamic vinegar in all my soups.
It's a great choice. She said balsamic vinegar. It's a very strong flavor. That would give the stew a little bit of a kick. Yes?
Rice wine.
Rice wine, still wine though.
Oh, that's
Right? Oh, you're all good. You're all good. So I want you to think about some options. Pick your favorite recipes and go ahead and think of ways to make them even more helpful. For instance, this recipe calls for beef broth, and I used fat-free and 50% less sodium. And if we wanted to make our own defatted broth at home, we could just go ahead and cook that roast. If we had a chance to chill it, that fat will just coagulate and we could skim it off the top. If we were really in a big hurry, we could take the roast out of its broth and put some ice cubes in it, and that would make the fat solidify to the point where we could scrape it off and we would have our own defatted broth. So I really think you're going to like the stew tonight. I hope you're comfortable with modifying a recipe and consider a main entree dish that has lots of color and lots of vegetable choices. So we have time for some questions. Do you have any questions about this recipe or modifying recipes in general? Yes.
Most of my recipes call for flour for the thickener. So is it the same, like if it calls for 2 tablespoons of flour, is it the same for cornstarch, 2 tablespoons of cornstarch? Or?
It's very, very close. This, it was straight. You want to have equal parts of cornstarch with the liquid that you're using. I use, when I make stir fry, I'll use just soy sauce and cornstarch. And just make a little slurry of it, and it just thickens instantly. It's really nice. Okay. The nice thing about using cornstarch is it doesn't get clumps. You don't get lumps in your thickener. It's very easy to use. Yes?
If you put it in a slow cooker, would it cook off the alcohol? So,
you know, it took the USDA study that I looked at. It tried a lot of different methods of trying to cook it off. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of heat. So, right, slow cookers are pretty low temperature.
That's why my stew is so good.
That's why your stew is so good. All right, any other questions? Yes?
Can you use bouillon in place of the broth?
Sure, you could. Right, absolutely. The bouillon in my kitchen here was not low sodium, so I wanted to truly follow the recipe the first time correctly, except for I couldn't resist doing those modifications. So, yes?
What if you use something like 7-Up in place of the wine?
That would work. Any liquid that could get the cornstarch to mix up appropriately would work. Water, even water. Yes. Right, but I just wanted a little bit of that. Oh, what is that flavor in there? So the vinegar. Yeah. Yes?
So what are the calories then, since it's low sodium, soy milk? What's
The calorie difference?
Yeah.
Okay, the calories are listed for you. Is that correct?
Yeah, for the old-fashioned one.
Okay. So with evaporated milk and soy, ooh, you're asking me to do the dietitian thing right here. I would say you're probably within about 10 calories, about the same, yes. Well, thank you. Yes, question?
How hard would it be to break this down to one person?
Oh, it wouldn't be hard at all. I did it 1.5 times. So there's some things that don't split well, but I feel comfortable. I think the only tricky thing, I don't think there's anything really tricky in it because you can pretty much split it half and half.
You could freeze some of it too.
And you could make the whole batch and freeze half. That's perfect. All right, thank you.